Minimum Wage Sentai. By Stephen Bova. Chapter 4 Remember the Fallen. Why is Billy's empty? Asked Jason as he walked over and looked at the transporter tube full of ocean water. They teleported the area around the changers, but sadly they had to leave them behind, said David as he looked at his wife, but Puppy was able to save you at least. I guess Billy wasn't wearing his. David was the former purple fighter. Puppy hacked their computers and discovered that the Zorgans had been able to track you all by our changers. How? Asked Kimberly as she walked over and looked at a large computer monitor which had the battle plans on it, as well as the placing of the different Zorgan ships, the 4 small ones, and the large mothership. Everything here is based off old Zorgan tech, replied Zordon. Zordon looked like a human, but his skin was white, not human white which politically correct people would call Caucasian. No, his skin was as white as snow, and all over his body had a mixture of orange and brown stripes. His ears were pointed at the lobe and his nails were naturally black and sharpened to a tip. Zordon's eyes were blood red and slit like a snake's. He wore a long tan tunic which to the humans it looked like a dress, but Zordon said his people called them tunics and every one of his people that wore clothing, wore this. Zordon also had a 3-foot-long tail which hid underneath his tunic. So if all our tech is based off your people's old stuff, asked Zack as he looked at the hangar with their old mechs in it, how the hell are we supposed to beat these guys? The last time they came here it wasn't to hold a picnic. True, their last plan was to make the brightest of us reproduce until they had highly intelligent offspring to enslave and kill the rest of humanity, said Puppy. Puppy was a small mechanical dog-like robot that was Zordon's companion. His body was silver and had a pair of glowing green eyes. He stood on his hind legs and had a small blue screen in his stomach. Over his right eye lit a small blue piece of glass which was held onto by a piece of metal that was attached to the side of his head. This was used as a screen for Puppy to use in case he wanted to see what was on his monitor. This came in handy when he would have to hack into equipment. Puppy usually had to go in and change security footage and cell phone camera footage of the fighter's true identity. I guess smart slaves are all the rage, said Jackie. She was the former orange fighter who at the time went by the name Jack. No, the Zorgan people find average humans too stupid to do basic tasks, so they only want the smart ones, said Puppy as he walked over to Zordon and sat on the ground allowing his owner to place his hand on his head. For all intensive purposes, Puppy was basically a smart dog. He still liked his head pet, his belly rubbed, and he would even chase a ball. Well, I remember Billy saying once that he tweaked our old mechs when the new kids got theirs, he made them more, well how he put them, human, said Walter as he looked out the window and stood next to Zack. Wait, you still talk to Billy? He wrote us all off for, well you know, growing up, said Zack as he turned and looked at Walter. No, he wrote us off, said Walter as he said, wrote us off, he made air quotes with his hands over his head, because we left him behind to clean up the mess. Think about it, we went off to college, or had our singing careers, and for the most part, by the time we got to where the fight was happening from the latest Zorgan monster from their zoo attacking the planet, Billy had already taken care of it, and was helping with the cleanup. Hell, the news even gave Jason credit for some of the attacks Billy stopped. He had a right to be angry, said Walter as he looked over at Jason. Well, he's dead now, nothing we can do about that, said Jason as he grabbed his belt and then shook his head. Did he work on any changers? He asked as he walked over to the computer screen and began typing. Unfortunately, said Zordon, no. We were never able to take enough of my people's tech out of a changer to make it uncontrollable by any mothership, and he picked a box up and he walked over to the middle of the room where a white table was rising from the ground. He placed the wooden box on the table and opened it. On the outside of the box had gold symbols on them. The symbols kind of looked like triangles, rectangles, and the other members of the angle family. But these were meant for the next group of fighters, and inside the box lied 6 crystals and changers. These changers resembled watches more than belt buckles. I know there are 7 of you, but we've only ever had 6 each time. Your group was the biggest group of fighters we've had. With Billy gone, continued Zordon as he picked the matching red crystal and changer up and handed them to Jason, only one of you will have to stay behind. I'll do it, said Jackie. I can go back to New York and help out our community with the cleanup. More than just our community was affected by the attack, said David as he walked over to his wife. A large 4-block radius of New York was destroyed. More than just New York, said Puppy as he chimed into the conversation. I know, said Jackie, but I'm going to help out our people first, as she walked over to the teleportation pad and smiled at her husband. Go get them, babe, come back to me in one piece, and she vanished in a beam of orange light. Well, the good news is, said Walter, the ocean levels are going down due to the large hole caused by Billy's death, as he showed the map of the planet, showing the water levels going down to the point it was at before global warming had taken effect. It's all about silver linings, White Fighter, asked Jason as he placed the changer on his wrist. So, how do we activate the power within these? He asked as he held the crystal over the watch. Well, you cross it over in one swift movement while saying, "Power activate," very loud, said Zordon. That sounds easy enough, said Jason as he pulled the crystal over the face of the watch. He yelled, "Power activate," and a red stream of light came out of the watch face and stretched to where the crystal was held. Now pull the beam across you, shouted Zordon, and as Jason pulled the stream across his torso, his 3-piece suit was covered with an armor-plated red one. On his helmet was a black strip over where his eyes would be, allowing him to see. Now, everyone else take your changers, said Puppy. Kimberly took the pink one, Trini took the yellow, Zach took the black one, leaving the blue and green ones remaining in the box. We didn't make a purple or white one, guys. I guess since Walter talked to Billy the most, he gets the blue one, and as the final remaining fighters took their new changers, they all screamed and pulled the crystals over their watches. Power activate, and they pulled the beams of light, which each light corresponding with the color of the crystals, across their torsos, and with that, they were all in their new armor-plated suits. Now go, my defenders of the earth, said Zordon, and with that, they all ran towards the hangar which held their mechs in them. As they got into their new cockpits, yet old cockpits, and as they started the engines up, Walter turned the speaker on and spoke to the 5 other fighters. Let's do this for Billy. Yeah, we all know wherever he is, he's looking down on us, and smiling, and with that, all the machines began to activate and fly out of the hangar. More like looking up, that son of a, said Jason, but he stopped himself from saying something ill of the dead. Miles, and miles, away, out in front of a bar, William Hawkins was walking towards the door from the parking lot, and he looked up and saw 6 colored ships flying toward the Zorgon ships. Good luck, said Hawkins as he turned around on his heels and walked into the bar. He knew how to contact Zordon, but the two did not leave each other's company on the best of terms. Also, his old team should have been more than enough to take care of these invaders. Heck, if he could do it by himself, 6 people should be able to do it with no problem. On the other side of the country, in New York City, Jackie was helping with the disaster relief when she was approached by a news reporter. Miss, can we talk to you? Asked the reporter. Sure, just keep up with me, we can walk and talk, and she ran over to a wounded man whose leg had been cut off by a falling beam. You're Jack O'Malley, right? Asked the reporter. Jackie, said Jackie as she helped a paramedic bandage the leg. In her professional life, Jackie was actually a pediatric doctor. She went to college to be a surgeon, but she fell in love with the idea of helping children. Now her husband David was a heart surgeon, one of the best in the world, but Jackie, she liked helping the young. Sorry, you were the orange fighter, correct? Asked the reporter. If you're going to ask stupid questions, you can go talk to that orange-colored clown running for president. And she finished bandaging the man, and shouted, "We need an ambulance over here, hell even an empty car with gas will work, we need to get this person to the hospital." Jackie never used terms like he, she, man, woman, without knowing the person first. "The beams hit right where you and your husband live, correct? So that means all this death and destruction was because of you and your friends," said the reporter, "and we see you're here, and 6 ships have been reported by our sister station flying up towards the Zorgan ships, so it's safe to say they missed their targets, and all of you got off scot-free." "No, that's wrong," said Jackie angrily. "Billy, William Hawkins, our blue fighter was killed." While at the bar, Hawkins was listening to the interview and he grabbed his chest and checked himself out. "I'm dead," he asked, and he looked at the bartender. William had gone to his regular bar for his lunch break. He always had more time than anyone else for lunch. He was always forced to stay after hours at work and then had to cut them during his lunch break so he would not get any overtime. "Hey Steve, am I dead?" asked Hawkins as he drank his beer he had ordered. "Not yet," replied the large dark-skinned man whose head shined like a piece of metal. Steve wore a black shirt and pants. "Rewind that real quick and turn it up," said Hawkins as he reached over the counter to grab the remote control to the TV, but Steve grabbed it first. "Hey, it's my TV, I'll turn it up and down," and he hit the rewind button and began to turn back the channel. "Okay, stop," said Hawkins as he saw Jackie's mouth stop moving. "No, that's wrong," said Jackie angrily. "Billy, William Hawkins, our blue fighter was killed," and Steve hit pause and looked at Hawkins. "So, you're dead?" he asked, and then the two laughed. "Pour this dead man another round," said Hawkins. "Who knows, maybe if I drank enough I'll make the TV right, well, at least for an hour or two," and the two began to laugh and joke about William being presumed dead. "There you are," shouted Carol. Hawkins turned around by glancing over his shoulder. "Oh, hey Mom," he said jokingly. "You're not dead," continued Carol. "I'm not," asked Hawkins as he felt his pulse. "Would you look at that," and he went back to his drink. "Why would your old teammate think you're dead?" asked Carol. "Beats me, they haven't talked to me in years." "Maybe that explains it," he laughed as he placed his empty glass down. "Another," he shouted as he pushed the glass over towards Steve. "Let's make my liver catch up to the rest of me," and the two laughed. "They have your tech," said Carol. "So?" asked Hawkins. "If they can lock onto your changer then," and Hawkins stopped Carol from talking. "Listen lady, didn't you hear the news? I'm dead. None of this is my problem," and he went back to drinking. "What happened to you?" asked Carol as she got up. "I remember you in high school, you weren't this miserable of a person." "It's called growing up," said Hawkins, and he nudged Carol with his elbow. "Besides, there is nothing in it for me to save this sorry world." "What, you want to be paid? You live in it, that should be payment enough." "You don't do what I do and call it living," Hawkins continued before he stood up from his stool. "Now, if you excuse me," and he got up and raised his half-empty glass into the air. "I would like to make a toast," and Carol turned and went to leave the bar, and she stopped at the door and turned around to look at Hawkins. "As many of you all know, today I died," and the crowd laughed, and some even went, "Ah, but fear not my friends, and fellow drunks, for I have risen. I have returned." This made Carol perk up a bit, thinking Hawkins was going to do the right thing. "I am not going to perform any miracles here tonight. I have to do enough of that at work, you know, because my managers expect me to do it, but not the people they promoted over me." During this rambling, Carol realized that this was the same old Hawkins she had had dozens of conversations with. "No, I am going to turn this beer," and he held the glass up to his mouth and smiled into piss, and he drank the rest of the glass in one swoop. The bar exploded with laughter as Hawkins slammed the bottle on the counter. "What happened to you?" asked Carol as she looked down on Hawkins as if she was better than him. When in fact she probably was. "You know my story," said Hawkins softly as he lowered his head towards the bar counter. "I sacrificed my happiness, my love, my family, for this planet, and I got nothing in return." Hawkins then picked his head up and placed his hand under his chin with his fingers interlocked. "I don't owe this world any more." Carol shook her head in disappointment and disgust before she turned around and began to walk out the door. "What a loser." "That's Mr. Loser," shouted Hawkins as he turned to the door with the aid of the swivel stool he sat in. Hawkins turned around and looked at his reflection in the mirror that lit behind the counter. "Mr. Loser," he said softly, and he looked down at the counter before perking back up and smiling at the fellow bar gatherers. "Gee, we have a one-night stand, she doesn't call me back, and I'm the loser," he said with a smile, making the bar laugh once more. Hawkins took his older, cracked smartphone out of his pocket and went into the photo gallery and looked at a photo of the 5 original fighters all standing together. This was a selfie Kim had taken after their first victory. Hawkins clicked some buttons on his phone and words appeared on the screen. "Are you sure you want to delete this photo? Yes or no?" Hawkins clicked yes and then placed his phone back onto the counter, right before placing his left hand on his forehead, using his arm to prop his head up. He looked back over his shoulder at the door, but then turned his head straight once more and shook his head back and forth and exhaled. "Mr. Loser." End of chapter 4.